Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining our event today, where we'll be discussing youth perspectives on the federal government and what this means in terms of government's ability to recruit young, diverse talent. As part of the Partnership for Public Services efforts to help make government more trusted and trustworthy, we're also working to help government better recruit the next generation of young public servants. Unsurprisingly, trust in the federal government overall is low, and this declining trust has serious implications for how the public interacts with government, as well as the ability of federal agencies to confront challenges facing the country. Joining me today to dive into the latest data on trust from youth, as well as its workforce implications, is Nadzeya Shutava and Katy Hogan. Nadzeya is a researcher who's been working on our trust research from the very beginning of this project's development 3 years ago. She also manages the design and delivery of data literacy training for government leaders. Katy Hogan is a director leading the partnership strategy to inspire the next generation of public servants. She oversees our federal internship program, the Future Leaders in Public Service Internship Program, which has placed over 400 students in government to date, as well as our Call to Serve network, which is comprised of nearly 1,800 staff and faculty from colleges across the country. The Call to Serve network connects colleges and universities with the federal government. Katy spent a decade in higher education before joining the partnership 2 years ago. Nadzeya and Katy, thank you both for joining me today. Now, Nadzeya, before we get into the data in the poll, can you tell us where this data is coming from?
Yeah, thank you, Hanadi, and thank you, Katy, for joining us today. Really happy to talk about our latest data on youth perspectives and trust in government. So the Partnership for Public Service has this series of online surveys that we're calling Pulse Check. We started conducting them in 2023, and they're designed to provide us insight into the public's views of timely topics related to trust in government. The data that we're going to be primarily talking about today comes from one such pulse check. It was an online survey of 1,000 Americans, all of them ages 18 to 34. It was conducted earlier this year, and it is not a random nationally representative sample of people's views in the country, but we did use sampling techniques to resemble the demographic makeup of the United States, which is a technique that allows us to conduct quick and agile surveys that approximate the public opinion in the country. So really interesting results here that I'm excited to dive in just a few moments.
That's great. Thank you, Nadzeya. And when it comes to demographics, why are young people an important group to study in our overall research on public trust and government?
Yeah, great question. So there are several reasons why looking at youth specifically when researching public opinion on the federal government is important. First, today's youth are tomorrow's leaders and tomorrow's decision makers. So understanding their attitudes and perceptions towards government now can provide insights into future governance trends and potential shifts in public trust in the future. The next point, I guess, on why youth perspectives is so important is related to innovation and change. Youth often bring fresh perspectives, innovative ideas, and willingness to challenge the status quo. Their dissatisfaction or trust in government can lead to social movements, policy reforms, changes in governance structures. So looking at what they think and how they think today can provide insight into that as well. And last but not least, I would say policy relevance. Governments need to address the concerns and priorities of young people to maintain legitimacy and relevance. Insights on youth opinions can provide policymakers with evidence-based recommendations on fostering youth participation in governance processes, leading to more responsive and inclusive policy outcomes. But I'm sure Katy has more to add on that front.
And when it comes to the data itself, can you tell us what specific aspects of young people's perceptions of government were most surprising or insightful from the latest data?
Yeah. So again, I'm gonna go over it in a few moments, so we'll see the exact numbers, but I would say that the most striking numbers for me came on the front of government communications. So a lot of young people don't feel that the government communicates effectively with them, and basically that signals to us that there's a strong sense of disconnect. And another front that I think there's a big gap to bridge for the federal government in terms of perceptions of young people is on hiring and potential participation of youth in the government workforce. So a lot of our young respondents felt that serving in government is a good way of serving their communities. However, most of them did not ever consider government careers for themselves. So there's definitely a big gap there that the government might want to address.
That's great. Thank you, Nadia. And Katy, when hearing some of these data points, what is standing out to you in terms of those implications for the federal workforce?
Yeah, thanks again for having me. So, as was shared at the top, I do a lot of work with higher education and working to connect the federal government with folks in higher education, whether that's career advisors, faculty members, internship managers, and of course, job seekers, the students. So, what I hear is not necessarily surprising. So, I work a lot again with federal agencies. And one of the first questions folks ask us when they learn more about what we do at the partnership is, how do we get more young people interested, or how do we make our work appealing, or how do we reach them and help them navigate through the hiring process? So federal agencies want to reach those young people, of course, but oftentimes feel that they could use more support or insight into how to do that. On the other side, I'm not surprised to hear that students want to make a difference and make an impact in their communities and answer that call to public service. I do think sometimes the story of what you can do in the federal government, specifically in the civil service, do not reach every student. So I'm going to talk more about this later in our time together. But we work really hard to make students aware of the incredible opportunities that happen across government. I'll just tease, we have a resource, gogovernment.org, that the partnership has developed and we use again to support our Call to Serve network members. So again, higher education folks, but also students. And one of my favorite among many of the tools there is our federal internship finder, which puts in one place over 900 internship and early career opportunities in government, so that career advisors, faculty, students can have at their fingertips a really good idea of the opportunities that exist in government. And even I learn about new opportunities and just incredible things that you don't always think of going on in government. I'll just close this part by saying, when the Partnership for Public Service was founded over 20 years ago, one of the core pieces of our mission was to get more young people into government. And that has not changed. Again, that's the work that my team does on the Call to Serve network. Right now, only 7% of the federal workforce is under the age of 30, and that hasn't actually changed much in the last 2 decades. And for comparison, that's compared to approximately 23% being under the age of 30 in other sectors. So workforce does not have enough young people. The federal workforce does not have enough young people. And there's a number of barriers to entry that keep that number low that, again, I'm going to talk about later during our time together. But it's really important that the government and higher education community work hand in hand when seeking to reach those younger job seekers.
Yeah, I mean, from my own experience, I definitely resonate with this sentiment that, government is an opportunity, a career in government is an opportunity to create long-lasting and impactful change. But I can also see how young people might view the dysfunction in Congress and feel that their ability to make meaningful change on issues of importance is limited. But I think that's, consistent with the partnerships research, right? That a lot of people equate the federal government with Congress, but really the federal government encompasses so much more than that. And I believe we have some slides from you, Nadia, to go through some of these data points. So if we can just get those.
Awesome. Thank you, Hanadi, also for sharing your opinion and your perspective here. So in terms of the online survey that we just mentioned earlier in this conversation, it was again conducted earlier this year between February 13, February 28. We had 1,000 respondents and all of them ages 18 to 34. We had quotas to approximate the population of the United States. So quotas were for sex, household income, political affiliation, as well as race and ethnicity. Next slide, please. And so the first set of questions was primarily on government trustworthiness and impact, just generally speaking. And that, in line with our previous research on the general public of all ages, showed that trust is scarce among young people. Only 44% of respondents see the overall impact of federal government as positive, and 51% of young people see it as negative, which is quite a striking number. And we also asked about youth perception of the impact the federal government has on just generally people around their age. And here we have an even more striking 58% of respondents showing that they think that impact was negative. And we were also interested in looking into what young people think about the future. In terms of when it comes to the federal government. So the question was, in 10 years, the federal government will be more trustworthy than it is today. How many of them agreed or disagreed with that? And it was almost an even split, with 40% of our respondents agreeing and 44% disagreeing. So overall, quite a balance of people having negative perceptions and positive perceptions. And we looked further, and if we can move to the next slide here, thank you. We looked further into different aspects of government effectiveness and how the government works and how it is perceived by youth. And one of the data points that really jumped at us was the federal government communication. So on question of agreement with whether the federal government communicates effectively with people around my age, only 27% of our respondents expressed agreement with that, and a striking 79% disagreed. So as I mentioned, one of my big surprises from this data was on communication, because 69% is a very strong majority. And it really highlights that sentiment of disconnect between the young people in the country and the federal government. We also asked open-ended questions from our respondents, and there were a lot of unprompted responses related to communication specifically. So we basically asked, what are the factors that influence how much you trust the federal government? And a lot of people brought up communication, transparency, effectiveness of communication, and how easily understandable communication from the government is. So just a few quotes here that I found really interesting and insightful. And I quote, "Primarily, my trust is determined by the ability of the federal government to communicate properly enough with its citizens to create a comforting environment for the people if there's fear or worsening times." And one more quote, "Keeping myself informed and making sure that we are told and up to date about everything in the news. I feel like as long as we know everything that's going on, we weren't blindsided. As long as they keep doing that, I think they're going to be leading us in the right direction." So I think these are really telling on how much young people would want to be kept in the loop and communicated with from the government side. And next slide. We also asked about different sources of information about the federal government. And in order from most to least trustworthy, we saw that most people chose family as the most trustworthy source of information on the federal government, which was actually very surprising to me as well. I would personally not choose my family as the most trustworthy source of information about the federal government, but interestingly, a lot of the young people chose that. So we thought that highlights the fact that youth would want that communication to be personalized and their close circle of people sharing information, and that trust being strong in the family department. But also we saw that young people are well aware of what sources are reliable, because they chose official government websites and academic institutions, both as number two in terms of trustworthy information on the federal government. And last slide, please. So one more point that I covered earlier is the perceptions of whether federal government career is a good way of serving communities. And again, a striking data point here, 67% of our respondents agree that it's a great, an impact, a way to have a positive impact on their communities. However, when you asked youth whether they considered or applied for a job in federal government, only 7% applied for such an opportunity, which highlights that between 67% of those who see it as an impactful career and 7% who have applied, there's a huge gap there that our organization, as well as the government itself, should be looking closely at in order to be able to make a change there.
Thanks so much, Nadia. Now, Katy, can you speak a little bit about the partnerships initiatives aimed at engaging young people in government, and what are some of the notable barriers to entry into public service?
Yeah, I'd love to. So, and we'll provide some links along the way, but we mentioned this or alluded to it, but one of the primary ways that we work on this particular issue is through our Call to Serve network. So again, the Call to Serve network, it's been with the partnership since our founding over 20 years ago, and it's comprised of nearly 1,800 members. And they are, again, folks who typically are in the higher education community. So professors and staff, career advisors, experiential educators. And the Call to Serve network is awesome because it's the only national system that works to connect federal agencies with the higher education community and try to develop strong ways for them to communicate and ultimately send talent into government. So we work with hundreds of people in the higher education community and connect them to federal agencies. We see this as one of the primary tools to help recruit the next generation of public servants. So if you're in the Call to Serve network, which I will just spotlight, we have a registration form. If you are not yet in the Call to Serve network and you are in the higher education community, please sign up. It's free. And every month, Call to Serve network members receive monthly newsletters with free resources, including paid internships for their students and recent graduates. So, the government is really big, and there's lots of places where opportunities may be announced or they may live. So this takes some steps out for our Call to Serve network members. They don't have to log into USA Jobs every day to find opportunities or search the internet. We do all of that for them in our monthly newsletter. So it's free. If you're in the higher education network, please join, and we're going to get that enrollment link to you all. We also offer a deeper option of membership in the Call to Serve network, and that's through our Federal Advisor Certificate. So this is a 7-week intensive online program that trains folks to be truly expert in all things federal. So Hanadi mentioned that I worked in higher education for 10 years. I found the federal hiring system to be really tricky. And I didn't know enough, candidly, at the beginning when I had students come to me and say, hey, I really want to look into careers in the federal government. And I worked with a lot of students that were interested in public service, including federal opportunities. So the Federal Advisor Certificate is designed to train folks like I was, someone who was on the front line of career advising and running an intern program for a university and helping those next generation public servants. So if you are interested, or if you want someone at your alma mater to enroll, we're going to link more information, but we're actually enrolling for summer 2024 right now. Again, it's fully online, so there's no travel. You don't have to show up at a certain time. And that'll be starting in June, but we're enrolling folks right now. So I've talked a lot about what we do for career advisors. We also want to support the students and the job seekers, and we do this in a number of ways too. So first, we have our Go Government website, and I teased that at the beginning. This is a really awesome tool. It's meant to be a complement to USA Jobs so that they work alongside each other and ultimately support the student and the job seeker in their pursuit of a federal opportunity. So there's all kinds of helpful resources. I invite you all to explore, but we have the Navigating USA Jobs page, background checks. I know background checks can be really different, a really different aspect of the federal sector. We also just have stories from public servants. I mentioned earlier today that sometimes, unfortunately, it's unknown all of the incredible work and opportunities that exist in government. So we work to bring those stories in a number of different ways. I tease this, but my absolute favorite tool is that federal internship finder. If this existed when I worked in higher ed, it would have been a game changer. So I'm so thankful that my team and the partnership were able to launch this last year. So it's somewhat new, but we're going to link this for you. But this rounds up again, nearly 1,000 internship, fellowship, and early career opportunities in government. So a lot of agencies maintain a website about how you can get into their agency as an intern or a fellow, but there was never one single place that you could go and search such websites. So this tool does that. There's filters. I invite you to explore them. So you can explore by career field, agency. You can filter out the unpaid because we at the partnership know that paid internships are important, and we candidly really only support paid internships. So it's a great way to learn what's out there. The government is just rich with opportunities for one's career, and it allows you to plan ahead. Another aspect of federal hiring that can be tricky for young people is that the lead time to apply is often longer than the private sector. So some opportunities take 3 to 6, even 9 months from application submission to starting. So this allows you to plan ahead. It allows you to explore opportunities and learn their timelines and say, okay, that's the internship I'm going to apply for next summer. I know that I need to be working on that in September. And finally, as for initiatives that we have, we also offer our Future Leaders in Public Service intern program. So we at the partnership actually offer a program that places young talent into government. These are paid internships in the federal government. And what's really cool is they can be done part-time or full-time, and they can be remote or in person. And I absolutely love this aspect because you don't have to move and you can do a fully remote internship. We've placed students over the years at HUD, the National Science Foundation, Departments of Transportation, Commerce, Small Business Administration. We started working with the United States Department of Agriculture, Office of Tribal Relations this summer. Really excited. We're actually recruiting for fall 2024. So if you are a student looking for an internship this fall, or maybe you're a career advisor or professor and you want to tell your students about it, the deadline is May 24th. So you got a couple of weeks, and we're going to link that for you. And if you're an agency, we work with agencies on a fee-for-service basis to participate in Future Leaders in Public Service to help with your recruitment needs and to infuse your agency or component with talent. So we're happy to talk about that as well. But we recruit from across the country, and our summer cohort last year actually had 36 states represented within the cohort, which I love. Summer 2025 will open in the fall, so stay tuned. Likely will be due at the end of November. And we already know one agency is confirmed for summer 2025, and that is the USDA's Office of Tribal Relations. So I know I covered a lot. If you were interested in government careers, or you are a student or a job seeker, I really encourage you to sign up for our monthly Go Government newsletter, and we're going to link that in the chat. Similar to the Call to Serve Network newsletter, but this one is designed for students and job seekers. This rounds up a monthly selection of paid internships, opportunities, things going on related to federal careers. Take some of the work off of you. So I really encourage you to take a look at that. Our newsletter always has paid opportunities for governments and recent grads. So I think I'm going to pass things back to Hanadi.
Thank you, Katie. I know we're over time, so I'll just quickly say that there is a research brief with the data that Nadia just discussed and more coming out May 8th. So please stay tuned for that. But Katie and Nadia, thank you both for joining me today, and thank you to our audience.